Because I had two choices after high school, and it was either join the Navy or stay here and play jazz. Because I grew up playing trumpet my whole life.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. Like started in third grade, went all the way through, did marching band, did jazz band, did, orchestra, the whole 9 yards playing trumpet, and got really good at it. So when I saw that you play 7 instruments, I was like, no way. Because we've always talked about guns and all this other stuff. And a lot of people don't think that guns and, being a band nerd can be a thing. But
well, I don't blow any brass. I'm not a woodwind or brass kind of guy. So when I was really young, I was like 6, my grandpa started getting back into playing violin. So he was, he is still to this day super big on bluegrass and like that Western swing fiddling and stuff like that. He's been state champ a couple of times. And so when he was getting back into it, I was like 6 or 7 years old and I started playing with him. And so initially I started playing violin, and I still play.
Sure.
Not as much as I should, and I definitely don't practice. Yeah. But like if I had a violin right now, I could play it.
You could kill it. You gonna play at Country Thunder?
You know what? I actually did talk to the promoter about. Right now, my bread and butter is like, give me a guitar. I'll play a guitar and sing, and be the monkey with the clapping cymbals.
Yeah, cool.
But I feel like it's cheating because all these different instruments, like they make the same kind of sense, and theoretically, like music theory wise, they're all the same. It's all the same intervals. It's all the same scales. And so going from guitar, bass, ukulele, those are all the same. And then violin, viola. My violin that I have is actually a 5-string, so it's like a violin and a viola because it's that EADG with a low C string. So violin, viola, bass, those are all kind of the same intervals, and they just work together. It doesn't take, you don't have to relearn anything. You just have to apply what you know to a different platform.
That makes sense. It'd be like, if I played trumpet growing up, if I grabbed like a flugelhorn or something, it's kind of the same mechanics. I think there's another valve on it or something, but like it's not too different. I could definitely play it.
Right. But like your technique and everything with your rod and all that, or you don't have a rod, but like your mouthpieces, your mouthpiece and everything is going to be the same.
Yeah.
And then like you can throw in like other ones, like, like a dulcimer where it's like, you can't mess up, stupid things like that. I can't play the piano though.
Okay. So you said when you were 6.
Mm-hmm.
So you were in the Army as well.
Yes.
So did you stop and you went into the Army? Did you play through the Army? Like, how did that affect?
I definitely played through the Army, and that was kind of like, guys are, they're all known, like they all have their thing, like they're that guy.
Right.
And I was the shooting guy because I was always shooting.
Yep.
And always trying to, and this was very early on in like what my learning process was as far as shooting and stuff goes.
Did you learn how to shoot when you were the same age?
I mean, like a lot of people say they grew up around guns, but like I grew up around guns. Yeah. When I was, so right now the family tradition is when you turn 12, you get a Ruger 10/22. And then when I was 13, I was like, dude, screw it. I'm going to do a bunch of landscaping jobs, make a little money because I want an AK-47. Yeah. So when I was like 13, I bought a Wazzer 10 and still got it.
You still have it?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's awesome.
It looks totally different now. I've got all the accoutrement to put on it, but like my background, because at the time I was being homeschooled. My dad was like, screw the public school system out here. The teachers are terrible. The kids are terrible. My kids are acting terrible because they're in that environment.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pull them out. And so I was like 7th, 8th grade, like 12, 13 years old. And when I wanted to pursue that, I was like, Dad, I want to get an AK. And he's like, write me an essay. Why? Right? Because I'm being homeschooled. And so I had to write a whole, I think it was like a 2,500 word essay on the difference between like ARs and AKs. And so doing all that studying and like that was really the gateway into all the.
What a great way to learn something.
Oh yeah.
Especially as a kid, like I want that well, I love that he said like, well, tell me why, because it probably helped you understand why too.
Right.
You probably thought it looked cool at first.
Right.
And then as you went through it, you're like, it probably confirmed, yes, this is what I want.
Right. Well, and it, I'm 13. I'm not going to be able to buy whatever I want. So like, what's the best one and done option for me at the time?
Right.
Something that is at the time, super cheap to get.
Right.
Ammo is super cheap. It's effective and it won't break.
And it's badass.
And it's awesome.
Yeah.
So those metrics, it's like you can't go wrong there's a reason they give them to 13-year-old kids in Africa,
right.
Like they just work.
Right. So I think it's super cool that we started off like that. And I didn't introduce you in the beginning. We got Cade Lamb here. So Cade, we're going to talk about your time in the Army and what you're doing now, because a lot of it is still carried over from the Army. And you're able to bring a lot of expertise and passion and about guns and all sorts of stuff. We went down to the border recently. We're going to talk about that. But let's get it out of the way real quick. Like your dad. Like I admire your dad. I can see him through you a bit. If people don't know, they probably know the guy with the hat.
Yep.
So your dad's Sheriff Lamb, you're Cade Lamb, and you mentioned earlier your grandfather. He's one that picked up the violin.
Yeah, that's my mom's dad.
Yeah. So you were telling me this when we were on our last road trip. I think it's, what is it? How many generations here in Arizona?
So, well, technically my dad was born in Hawaii.
Okay.
But as far as generations here in Arizona, I mean, you can go back to, it's my great grandfather is Daniel Webster Jones. And if you go to Lehigh over in Mesa, there's actually a statue of him there because he founded Mesa. And he was one of the early missionary pioneers that came over with the Mormons who came down and like settled the Arizona territory. And they were mixing it up with the Mexicans and the Indians and all that stuff back in the 1800s. And so, I mean, as far back as then, I have heritage here in the Valley.
I think that's so cool because, one of the things they say about people in Arizona is that everyone's a transplant. Everyone came from somewhere else, supposedly, right? I moved here like in preschool. So I almost like made it. I was just born in Pennsylvania, moved here when I was, 3 or something like that. But most people, it is true. Like you don't rarely talk to that many people that are from here, and especially that have a lineage that goes back as far as you. So when I heard that, I was like, oh man, this is super cool. Because like you guys have strong roots going back far, is even founding Mesa, and now dad's running for Senate, and now you're here doing a lot of great work on the border and with a lot of other stuff. And I'm like, this is just such a cool like family story. That's one of the things that stuck with me. I was like, man, this is like you're living history and it's still here in Arizona. You guys didn't like pack up and go somewhere else. And like, it's still like a continuous story in Arizona. It's an Arizona story.
We're not the Goldwaters or a family like that where we have half the state named after us.
Not yet.
But it was always super irritating as a kid, especially when we'd go to church because my dad knew everybody.
Yeah.
My grandma knew everybody. Everywhere we went, we knew somebody. And, as a kid, like you want to get on, like you're not interested in the conversation that your dad's just having on the side as you're trying to leave and go do whatever your kid mind is fixed on.
Yeah.
And so that was already always frustrating. But then as I got a little bit older, it started to become cool because people were recognizing me as like, oh, hey, you're Mark Lamb's kid. I'm like, yeah, like I am. You go to Elmer's in Chandler, right?
Yeah.
Elmer's Tacos right across the street from Chandler High School. My grandpa was getting Elmer's Tacos when he was in high school at Chandler High School.
No way.
So, like that kind of stuff it's just cool. And now it's blown up exponentially because he is now the American sheriff and soon to be senator. So that name recognition, it means a lot, and it definitely changes your perspective and approach to the world, because now you're not just some dude who can road rage or be impulsive. Like everything you do has a ripple effect,
right?
Whether or not you're a name like the Lambs or Ellsworths or, some of these huge family names in whatever community you're from. But like, even if you're like every single day, everyone's creating their own legacy, whether your legacy sucks or whether it's legendary.
Yeah.
And so, you can either have that bad reputation and create that bad legacy, or you can, be mindful and understand those ripple effects and know that every hand that you shake, everybody that you meet has a story, has a purpose. They have their own drive, their own desires. And if you can help other people achieve that, they're going to help you back. And when you're able to kind of do that networking and build that community, and, and essentially it's growing your personal brand, but that's just modern talk for creating a legacy.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of legacy, we were talking about your dad at one point, and you said, he's a real man, and that term gets thrown around a lot. I have this one of my favorite books here. I'm giving this to you actually, called The Way of Men by Jack Donovan. Talks about masculinity and our roles throughout history as men and what they are. It's essentially, in the very beginning, if you think about it, it was establish a perimeter. It was protect that perimeter, expand it, and then go from there. Okay, well, now what else do we need? We need fire, we need food, we need protection. And we find these different roles throughout society, but like us as men, we always knew where we were as men. That's definitely getting lost these days.
Big time.
But back to like what you said, like, I'm curious from your perspective, like when you said like your dad, Sheriff Lamb, is running for Senate, and his opponent is right now on the GOP side is Kerry Lake. Right. So when you look at the two, it's like, well, Kerry already ran for governor here in Arizona, somehow lost to a completely incompetent person who's in there now, Hobbs. I have no idea how that happened. So she's already failed at that. And I don't think a lot of people even realize that Kerry Lake and Sheriff Lamb are running against each other right now. And I bring that up because I didn't really put that all together in my head, because I was like, no, these two have always like supported each other. Like, what the heck happened? But if you look at the contrast of the two candidates, now we're not going to talk politics the whole time, because I want to ask about really what it means to be a man. You said something about this when we were in the car, and you were like, well, you have to look at the two. Like, this guy over here is already running a county. He's already leading hundreds, if not thousands of men, and women and professionals in a very dangerous profession. He already has proven leadership. And then you said, he's a real man. Look at him. So from your perspective as his son, like, what does it mean to you to be a real man?
I was just thinking about this the other day, and I was talking to my mom about it. And, my military career was all over the place, and one of the things I wanted to do was get into special operations. And now, retrospectively, like, it obviously was not God's plan for me, and things are working out exactly the way they need to.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you kind of see is like the operator kids, right? Where their dad was Delta or a SEAL or whatever, and those kids are goofy. Mm-hmm. Like, sorry to any of you operator guys out there that have families, but like, more often than not, those kids turn out goofy. And what we were talking about especially was, and you see it a lot in the SEAL community. Now, I wasn't a SEAL or anything like that, but there's so many dudes out there whose dads were SEALs, and then they come into the teams. And particularly those boys, are raised with what most would consider toxically masculine like fathers, but they're also being raised by the teams. And as you know, like, that culture is not healthy for you got to have it. You have to have it to be successful in that space. But for a young man who's developing who he is and his personal identity, it's not healthy, because it's hyper masculine, it's toxic, and it truly is toxic, where it's all it is chase and tail, dipping, alcohol, bars, the boys.
Lots of hazing.
Yeah. And I mean, you're going to develop a physically strong and even mentally resilient dude, but when it comes to the more important side of things, you're not. And so I was very fortunate that my dad wasn't necessarily an operator. I'm a very strong member of the Mormon Church. And so growing up in that environment, I had my dad he was a cop at the time, but he was always home, and he was not just providing that strong example of being a cop and being the class valedictorian in the academy, and then rookie of the year, and then officer of the year the next year, and then the next year becoming a detective, and then being detective of the year. right?
Cool.
Like back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
So I mean, like obviously that's and then being SWAT and stuff, like, yeah, my dad is awesome. But I was also surrounded by a lot of guys that I went to church with within the scouting program back when that was a thing, the Boy Scouts of America, and just other like youth leaders within the young men's program that the Mormon church has that were not just tough dudes. Like, yeah, it's cool to be a tough dude, but they were caring husbands and they were attentive fathers, and they treated us boys with that same care and attention. And so I was able to see that different dynamic of, machismo and bravado and doing all the cool things, but also being able to turn around and, take care of women and children, and that true essence of what it is to be a man.
Yeah.
Because it's not just beating on your chest and, proving yourself to the world, to a bunch of people who don't care.
Right.
But as you said, improving your fighting position, right? Where you're at, taking care of everything in-house, making sure that your house is in order, making sure that your wife is taken care of, making sure that your kids are going to grow up with those same values and principles that are going to make their family successful. And again, creating that legacy. So I had a lot of that influence around me, and that really changed my perspective going into really going into the military, and especially coming out of the military and starting a family.
Yeah, I mean, you basically described, I think, what true masculinity is right there. It's protecting, but it's also providing, it's presiding, it's leading, and it's doing all those other things that are not, in an alpha, that are not all that craziness, which is needed, but really having it all together, I think, is where we're supposed to land, and it's great you had that leadership. And is that kind of where fear not, do right came from? Because when I think about it, fear not, do right. Okay, so what you just described there kind of sounds like maybe that's the kickoff for that, or
yeah. So in 2016, I was serving a mission for the church, so
okay.
I was gone. But my dad ran for sheriff for the first time and won. And one of pretty much the campaign slogan was "Fear not, do right." And afterwards, we were like, "This is kind of like this resonates with people. Let's turn it into an LLC, put it on a T-shirt, and." Yeah. We have it. We have it now. We have the business for it. And at that time I was getting home from a mission, getting into the Army, and, it is that fear not, do right principle where it's like, in today's day and age, everything is topsy-turvy. It's a fugazi. Nothing makes sense. Right. And scripturally, it talks about this, where what's right is wrong, what's wrong is right, and what's truth is false, and everything's backwards. And so that's one of the beauties of, and that's one of the very important tenets for me as a religious dude, is that, like, that's the source of truth, right? Like, if you know this is true, then you can pretty well decipher everything else around you to be true or false.
Yeah.
And there's promises within that. If you do what's right, you don't have to worry about it.
That's the way I see it. Like, it's fear not, do right, but I'm also like, well, if you start by doing right, you don't have to fear.
Exactly.
Right? That's cool.
Exactly.
So what do you guys do? I know you have shirts. You've been doing giveaways and everything. What else? What is the brand?
Yeah. So initially it was just like, let's put it on a T-shirt apparel company. We'll look into some different stuff. And I mean, it's still pretty young in my eyes. Like, we've had it for about 6 years now, but obviously you got to kind of grow into what you want to be and do that development. And so in 2022, I was on my way to transition out of the Army, and I was doing the internship where I basically came to Arizona for 3 months just to not be in the Army, but still get paid by them.
Okay.
And during that time, I was like,
what were you doing then?
So it was like the Army has the Soldier for Life Transition Assistance Program, and you can do internships, and they have a list of internships, but you can also do a individual internship that's not a part of one of their programs. All you have to do is have a company and have that company sign off on it, and then have your command sign off on it. And
So it's a real internship.
it's a real internship, but it also happened, but it was for my own company.
Oh, that's
So,
okay.
yeah. So it was like, hey, I'm going to go be an intern over here. And they're like, okay, like the CEO signed off on it. So I guess it's good. And it's like, yeah, well, I'm the CEO. So
of course I signed off on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was in Arizona for like 3 months. And at that time, I was just starting to get approached, like just, I was starting to get like exposed to the political space. I had been to a couple Turning Points events. I had dated a girl for a little bit who was super politically active, kind of like almost a pundit influencer type.
Yep.
And I kind of was like, dude, I want to start a podcast. And, you know, there's so many things that you want to talk about on a podcast.
Yeah.
There, you know, but usually it's better if you dig a hole 2 inches wide and 2 miles deep. And so I was like, how can I talk about everything within a 2-inch lens and just have that everything be all the content digging deeper and deeper? And so the long form answer, if I was, you know, in an elevator on Shark Tank or something like that. So the Fear Not Do Right podcast provides practical kinetic solutions to complex social and political issues in order to enable a more autonomous and independent American people.
Nice.
So, I mean, that's kind of a mouthful, but the idea is, you know, people are very frantic and nobody has solutions. Nobody has ideas. You go to these political forums and you listen to politicians speak, pundits speak, experts speak. They don't say anything. And it was driving me crazy. You know, they're like, they'd get asked questions like, oh, what are we going to do about China buying farmland? And when you think about it, like, what on earth could I personally do about China buying farmland? That's crazy. But what could an individual do to hedge their bet against that? Let's talk about starting a garden. That's a practical kinetic solution to a very complex and overwhelming problem that people have no idea how to solve. And starting a garden isn't going to fix that issue, but it's going to enable you to be more autonomous and independent in the face of that. Same thing with, you know, you talk gun ownership and all that. You talk about, homesteading, baking sourdough, starting a family, leadership, all of this stuff. There's so many issues out there that people get hot and bothered about and they get overwhelmed by. Yeah. And so let's start talking solutions.
Over those things.
They have no control.
This is my biggest thing when like people in general are just blabbering on about politics, right? This is why, like, dude, like, there's so many people that I know that are in politics, but the last thing I personally want to do is try to have an opinion on every single thing, every day, every step of the way, because politics is so convoluted. It's always what you see was actually what's happening, and it's just such a mess, and people get so twisted up about it. I always do exactly what you just said. I remind myself this is how my family operates, and I tell other people this. It's like, look, you got to take care of you first. If you can become more capable and more independent on your own, it matters less what's going on in Washington or in your state, legislator and stuff like that. So yeah, while there are things that are going on that might make you angry or, think are going to affect you or whatever, if you can be at a point where you're truly a free man or a free woman and you don't rely on them, it doesn't really matter as much, if at all. It doesn't mean like we just ignore politics and we don't try to send good people to Washington and into our state governments and stuff. But it's like so many people are just bent out of shape and they're not even taking care of themselves. So like if you have like you said, you have no idea how to grow food or make food, you're sick, you're weak, mentally and physically, like you're not taking care of your own home and all these things. It's like, that's the stuff that matters. And the more people that do that, the less reliant we'll be on government, which means all these people that go there that are not deserving to be there, if they keep making shittier and shittier decisions, which I'm sure they will, it doesn't really matter as much. So like it should come back to like us taking care of ourselves. And then of course we still try to send good people in there, like your dad and like my buddy Eli Crane and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like in the scheme of things, there's so many things happening. Like people worried about China buying farmland. How does that affect someone that lives in an apartment at like 56th Street in Greenway? Not at all. But they're letting that ruin their day.
Exactly.
It's like, dude, there's so much more to politics. And I think one thing I was very surprised and really cool, I love learning about you, was how deep in the knowledge you are about politics and how they work and campaigns and PACs and, like all these different things. I'm like, dude, people like have no freaking clue what is going on in politics. They see the headlines, they freak out, they lose friends over it, they lose business over it, they ruin their lives sometimes over it, and they have no idea what's happening.
Here's the truth about politics is no one knows what's happening. Nobody knows what's happening. I mean, I'm sure there's a few suits that, like crash planes into 9/11 into the Twin Towers. Like the people who shot JFK probably know what's happening. But, like 99% of people, especially those in politics, have no idea what's happening. There's no rules. It's all made up and it's pretty fake. That's been one of the biggest lessons learned. Now, there are rules and like you got to know how to not go to jail with
but like you said,
finance and stuff.
Just made by somebody at some point.
They're just made up.
That was just made up.
They were just made up. And so, and that's been one of the craziest things is, and one of the biggest lessons applied is being responsive over being reactive.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that people within politics and who pay attention to politics lose their minds over is they are so reactive to everything, right? Good example is a certain candidate for office here in Arizona just made a huge public statement about the issue of abortion. This individual in the office that they're campaigning for will have no decision-making ability or legislature anything if they were to get elected. They'll have no impact on the abortion issue at all. It's a state issue. They're running for a federal office.
That seat is not, it's not even an option.
It doesn't have anything to do with anything.
Completely different.
And now everyone is just dogpiling on him. And it's pretty funny to watch. But that's one of those reactions, right? An individual chose to react instead of respond because the correct response is zip it. You don't say anything. But that's the kind of like strategy and, workarounds that you see where it's like nobody knows what they're doing, right? Especially, and it's kind of similar to when you meet like famous people, especially musical acts, actors, talents, things like that. Like they just exist. And there's a team of people that say, you're going to wear this, you're going to say this, you're going to go here, you're going to do that, and you're going to do exactly what we tell you. And you know what? We'll take care of you. You'll have meals, you'll have a hot girlfriend, you'll be in the media, you will have the illusion of money and power, but like we will control every aspect of your life. And they're totally okay with that.
And people think that doesn't happen to politicians somehow.
Oh,
that happens to sports stars,
Yeah.
musicians, basically anybody in the public, like news anchors, like literally anybody that has an audience and has attention and eyes on them. But then they're like, oh no, but this politician is going to save the world. It's like, dude, there is more power and influence and money in politics than anything. You think the NFL has a lot of money? Look at the U.S. government.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think it's really fascinating. Like to my point, you made my point. You know so much of the inner workings of politics. I wish people would spend even just a little bit of their time, if they're even politically interested, in looking at how things actually are working, whether it's right or wrong. Just what does a PAC actually do? How does somebody get in office? When they get there, can this person even have an effect on fill in the blank issue? Because they're like, this is going to, I mean, imagine that one candidate. Imagine how many people are raging right now when they don't even realize that candidate has nothing to do with the issue they're so fed up about. It's like, do you realize what you're doing? You're wasting your energy and your time. Maybe just learn a little bit more.
It's not even about like knowledge of the inner workings. It's just if you can take a 30,000 foot perspective of the situations, be like, why would they say this? What's the outcome?
Good point.
What are they trying to do? Are they trying to goad another candidate into reacting? Are they trying to, create some kind of, get people worked up into a tizzy?
Yeah.
And the left is masterful at this because they just make it up. Like when I say things are made up, like they literally just make shit up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's no facts or evidence or truth or anything behind it. They just make it up, and people freak out about it.
They know they can.
And there's no accountability.
Right.
And I think that's one of the biggest selling points. You know, if I were to shamelessly plug my old man running for Senate here, you know, everyone is tired of the charades. Everyone.
Yeah.
Everybody. The thing that people crave more than anything is, and you see it with kids, right? We have daughters about the same age, right? Kids want kids, and we'll just take anybody who doesn't want to be accountable, right? They want structure, they want stability, and people, they want that foundational support. They want something solid that they can rely on, right? And that's one of the things that's causing so much upheaval is there's nothing they can rely on. The dollar means nothing. The economy is in shambles. Politicians say anything they can to affect the way you think. So what is real? What is truth? How do we affect this? Well, it starts with guys like Sheriff Mark Lamb, who's running for the U.S. Senate, who come in like a bull in a china shop to say, this is the situation at hand. This is the plan. This is how we execute it. Execute.
Right.
That's how simple it has to be. And, you know, like with even, you know, you break it down to things like parenting. It's like if your kid is bouncing off the walls, being naughty and mischievous and like needs that behavior to be corrected, right?
Right.
Right now, the whole thing is like gentle parenting and being like, hey, like, let's apply that. And it's like, look, yeah, like that may work with a very sensitive kid, but 99% of the time that kid just needs to be told no. And you say, these are the rules. This is why you can't do it. Stop it. Or this is the rules. This is why you have to do this. Do it.
Yeah, they want strong, confident leadership and direction.
And that makes them so much more secure and happy because they know the boundaries. They know what's what's off limits. And that's kind of the base structure for a society. And when you don't have that, you're disenfranchised from a society, and that society starts to deteriorate. And we see that now where anything can mean anything, so anyone can be anyone. And now we have drag queen story hour in elementary schools. Like, how is that a thing? How is that possible? That's so bizarre and unreasonable and absurd and preposterous. And let me get a thesaurus out for every word I can match to that. It is unbelievable that we're close to that. If you were to go back 4 years ago, 5, 10, 20, it's unthinkable. And now it's normal.
It's insane. It really is. And speaking of insane, let's talk about a few weeks ago, you and I, along with Adam, Jake, and Don, we went down to the border. And I want to talk about the border, but not like what people might think. Like, we're not just going to talk our opinions on the border. What I think you're doing something so unique with another company you have, Sonoran Asset Group. You took us down to the border and literally gave us a tour of the border. And it was such an eye-opening experience for me for so many different reasons. It's insane what's happening down there, but I want to talk about it from the standpoint of we were actually there, and you have been there, I don't know, 100 times, like a lot. You've been there a ton of times. You know the border, I think, probably better than anybody, because we're talking about, you know, politicians that are trying to affect change. And if you think about Arizona, we're obviously a border state. The entire state borders on the Mexican border. And it's such a big issue for us here, but not only just in Arizona, because a lot of people that come through pass through and go to other states. And now there's people in New York freaking out about, you know, immigrants in New York. And it's like, dude, that's really far from us. But a lot of them came through here. But back to this trip to the border, my mind was absolutely blown by a couple different things. One being, there's a couple obvious things that could be fixed very easily. Like the border wall, in my opinion, is pretty remarkable. That thing is incredibly strong. Like, you could drive a freaking truck in it at full speed and it would make a noise, but nothing would happen. Yeah. But you could see where people were coming in because there was like an 8-foot piece or whatever of this fence laying on the ground instead of standing up, and people just walking in. And, you know, Adam has built a lot of the border. back in the day. He's like, dude, us right now. He's like, give me the keys to that machine. We could fix that, but it's not being done. But anyways, talking about the border, I think it's so unique that you and your dad, who's running for Senate in Arizona, truly know what's going on at the border. And it's not just a soundbite. It's not an opinion. You're not down there crying, pretending to, care about something that's going on. Like, tell me in your own words, like, what's going on with the U.S. border in Arizona?
A lot.
A lot.
A lot is going on with it in multiple, and it's multifaceted too. Obviously, like investigating it, there's the immigration piece, but then there's also your port of entry piece, and they're kind of two gas pedals that I don't know. It's complicated in a way that people don't understand.
Yeah,
so
let's just build it up real quick, because you do investigate this.
Yeah.
So like Sonoran Asset Group, you guys spend a lot of time there. Like you filmed, you talk, you travel, 4-wheel drive, walk, hike, the whole 9 yards. You've spent a ton of time there. So this is firsthand personal experience.
Yeah. So across the country, I mean, there's thousands of miles of border with Mexico. Right. And what people don't understand about Arizona in particular is, it's, if you were to go to the Mexico side, it's split up into different plazas, and plazas are owned by different cartels, and they control the cartel trade. They control the traffic through these different points. Seldom is it going through ports of entry. I mean, they do try to get stuff through ports of entry, but Border Patrol, port authorities, like they do a really good job at those ports.
Those are the official crossing points.
Those are the official crossing points, which are very important, and we'll come back to it. Where we went was an area in Sassabee. And it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, between Nogales and the Tohono O'odham Indian Reservation. There's a portion of wall there, but as you get onto the res, there's no wall. Yeah. And the mountains are so extreme on the other side that they can't put a wall there. And the other aspect of it is that entire area is national forest. So it's either national forest or wildlife reserve, which is very strategic when you consider who the congressman of that district is. And if you look at it's Congressman Grijalva is the congressman over, that southern Tucson sector of the border. But he's the congressman, but he's also on a bunch of congressional committees for like wildlife and conservation, things like that. And it's strategic because they've created so much red tape in this area that for any federal or law enforcement agency to come in, they have to cut through that red tape with permits and game wardens and this and that in order to operate in that area. So it's very difficult for them to enforce things the way you would expect it to be forced. And so the other aspect of it is Arizona, I think, is like 17% private property. The rest is like state land, BLM land, stuff like that. So it does fall onto the federal government, unlike Texas, which is 95% private ownership.
Oh, wow.
Now, Texas, if you look at the terrain, is pretty mild in most areas, especially where you're seeing high crossings. And that's why you see so many South American families, a lot of women, a lot of children. And you see some of the other cats coming through, but you're seeing large numbers in low-risk groups. Arizona is the opposite. Arizona is a high-risk environment. The terrain is treacherous. You were there. You saw firsthand. You'll die in those mountains. There's nothing out there for hundreds of miles. Right. You will die if you do not have the proper training, techniques, or sustenance and equipment to get into that mountain range. Like, you'll die.
Right.
It's nuts. And so they use that terrain to their advantage to move high-risk traffic through there. And that's going to be the majority of your drugs like fentanyl, methamphetamine, your sex trafficking. So the majority of women and children coming through there are being sex trafficked. That's what it is. And then on top of that, your high-risk individuals coming from they go through countries like Mauritania, Sudan, Chad, where they're able to, yeah. But most of those people we're seeing a lot of numbers from Syria, Somalia, nobody friendly to the United States, nobody friendly to you or I.
Right.
they're coming through that area. And they're doing so through the, more or less, they're doing so through the protection of the cartel. Now, the cartel's a whole different piece because there's infighting and a literal war going on down there right now between the El Chapo's people and the Salazar family and Maya Zambada, and it's a whole thing. But what people don't understand, and again, there are candidates out there who will say, we need to shut down the border, right? Well, what does that look like? They're talking about closing ports of entry. That's what it looks like to them. They want to see obviously an increased show of force in those areas where there's high traffic. Mm-hmm. But, the humanitarian aspect of it only exists because we allow it. We allow the cartel to operate. If we shut down the operation, there's no more humanitarian crisis because they're not moving people like that. One of the big issues, though, that people overlook is when they say we need to shut down the southern border is the fact that Mexico is our biggest trade ally in the world right now. Mexico has 3 times the labor force of China for 1/3 the cost of China. I believe in Arizona alone, it's like a $9 million economy of people coming through the Nogales port of entry. If you go through just the Nogales port of entry, just in retail commerce, people coming up and going
sure.
just back and forth, it's about a $9 million economy that, they're driving up to Phoenix, Tucson, spending money, seeing movies, buying stuff. I want to say it's annually, but the trade, so all the agriculture, the produce, mm-hmm. There's literally thousands of trucks coming through these ports of entry every day.
Right.
That's billions of dollars a year, solely reliant on the southern border and our relationship with Mexico. So when you say shut down the southern border, what are you really saying?
Yeah, we can't shut all that down.
You cannot shut that down because you're costing billions, right? You're concerned about China buying U.S. farmland. Well, what about Mexican farmland that is currently stocking your grocery shelves right now? That's a big deal. On top of that, just to use Nogales as an example, Nogales, Arizona has about 25,000 people living there. Nogales, Sonora has about 450,000 people living there. And that they work back and forth across the border all day, every day. Mm-hmm. And that's millions and millions a day in commerce being handled right there. So what does shutting down the U.S. border really look like? And that's one of those things where it's we don't need to shut it down. We need to enforce the law. That's what the solution is. You can be trying to get into off and say, I have a 16-point plan of how to fix the border. You don't need a 16-point plan. You need a 1-point plan. It's already there. It's called enforce the law.
That's right.
That's it. And a lot of people say, well, we need to make the cartels a terrorist organization. We need to make, we need to go down there and show military force. Is that what you want to do with your closest trade partner in the world? Your most important trade partner in the world? You want to put tariffs on that and make your tomato go from 35 cents to $3.50 overnight? Because that's what happens then. And on top of that, all these people that are coming from Mexico illegally into the U.S., a lot of them are false asylum seekers. They're coming from whatever, and they're saying, oh, I'm claiming asylum.
We saw some of that for sure.
We did.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't claim asylum because there's no asylum claim coming from Mexico. It's not a
thing.
But if you declare cartels a terrorist organization, they get asylum claim in Arizona, in the U.S.
Interesting.
So you change the dynamic there. So it's actually, if you are for the immigration, we'll call it the invasion. And if you look up the definition of invasion, it is an invasion. If you look up if you're for the invasion on the southern border, you should be for declaring the cartels terrorists, because that makes it 10 times easier for everybody coming across to stay here.
That's an interesting twist.
Yeah.
You mentioned, the cartels a handful of times, and I've lived in Arizona for a long time, grew up here basically. I don't know how many people listening actually, I'll say, believe in the cartels. Because it sounds like such a movie thing. It sounds like such a Hollywood thing, like the cartels. They're doing all these crazy beheadings and all these evil things and all this stuff. But like that's really only 100 something miles away. But it's real. And when we were there, we saw guys that were, we call glassing us. Like they were using binoculars or a scope. Probably I'm sure they had weapons. They're watching us. And as we were going there, like one of the things that really stood out to me was, I think, how important it is to understand how dangerous it really is and can be. And we talked a lot about your Army experience while we were down there. And then it was just, I think the week after, the same spot we were at, a bunch of these like cartel trucks came over with, big, like heavy machine guns. And
that was 12 hours after we were there.
12 hours later, like all this stuff. But the cartel is a big talking point sometimes, but it is a real thing. And especially down on the border, you can literally see it. And that was one of the most like eye-opening things for me. It was like, okay, we're right here on the border. Here's the fence. And right there, a couple 100 yards on the other side of the fence is a cartel sniper or a scout, whatever you want to call them. And they are there because, like you said, they control that area, that illegal port of entry for people. But it's a real thing. This is not a boogeyman thing. It's not a made up thing. Like the cartel is real, and they do come over and do stuff on our side sometimes. So the fact that Border Patrol, we saw this. We talked to the freaking Border Patrol guy. The Border Patrol, in my opinion, my own words, has kind of turned into, in a lot of cases, like an Uber driver for people that have come across the border. And like I grew up here in Arizona, and like especially way back in the day, you'd always make jokes, to your Hispanic friends or something about ICE coming or something like that. But like that's not even a thing anymore, because people that come across the border are literally looking for Border Patrol because that's when they've made it. Oh, thank God, Border Patrol is here. Can I get an apple and some water and a ride now?
Yeah.
And it's so nuts to me. I know I said a lot there, but like tell me about the cartel and how your Army experience comes into what you do at Sonoran Asset Group, even just from a situational awareness thing, so you can safely show people the border. Because you've had people from like media outlets and celebrities and politicians and all sorts of people, and they go to you and they trust you, one, because you know about it. But two, I think it's also because like you've got a really good skill of all the stuff you've taken from the Army to be able to know what to look for and, to potentially go on offense and defense, depending what happens. But it's needed. It's not a walk in the park down there.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that people sometimes get, one of the things is like the cartel's not going to shit where they eat.
Yeah.
They do not want problems there because they're making, right now, I believe the estimation is $200 million a day. $200 million a day. It's amazing. Off the southern border. So,
and if people think that's crazy, I want to just keep driving home. Like this is what's happening. Like we were in a piece of the border that was like nothing, like an inch on the map or something, not even probably. There's thousands of miles of border. So if you're like, how could they possibly be doing that much? Well, we saw a couple hundred people just in the half the day we were there. And if you think about thousands of miles and all the different things they do with humans, with drugs, with all these different things, people paying for all these, abilities to cross the border and all the stuff they do, that's a real figure. And that's a serious enterprise.
Oh,
what else makes
massive.
$200 million a day? Like that's insane.
I mean, the U.S. government can spend that much a day.
We're very good at spending it. Yeah. But I just want to make sure that people like understand when they hear some of these things, they're like, man, I don't know. Cartel seems like Hollywood. Millions of dollars a day seems insane. And I think this guy doesn't know what he's talking. No, it's real.
100%. Yeah. Again, the cartel isn't going to shit where they eat. They don't want problems. However, depending on the season, depending on what's going on, they are very brazen because like you said, Border Patrol's footprint there has diminished significantly in the last year. They've gone from being Border Patrol to being more like the border administration where they are going to process people in.
Right.
And it's a shame because some of those dudes are hard chargers, but even to some, like your special operations units, your BORTAC, BORSTAR dudes, they're getting pulled off to go like push paper and process people. Like it's nuts. And like my heart goes out to them because there are dudes who are out there who want to do that job. They're there to do the job, and they're having to sit on their hands. Even 10 years ago, dude, if you were border patrol, like you were the shit. Like that's a cool job.
Yeah.
You're getting after it, chasing people down, chasing, mules out
like a
there.
narc in LA or something.
Yeah. Like you're doing cool stuff,
Yeah.
and now it's just like, you feel bad for them because they got a job to do. And because of this administration and Mayorkas and Biden and, and that all rolling downhill to guys who, they got families to feed, they got jobs, they got careers. It's like, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
But the cartel piece of it, man, they are brazen, and there have been gunfights down there across the wall. Like there have been rounds exchanged across the wall, 100% by the cartel. There have been armed, like squad-sized elements coming up through on technical vehicles into some of these different camps and different areas, snatching people up who didn't pay, killing people, leaving them out in the desert. There are no rules for them down there. They are the law, which is pretty terrifying because, and I mean, you were down there. Like it's not like, it kind of has to be that way. Like it's Western. Like if there's no one coming to save you out there.
It's the Wild West, and it makes perfect sense because like our guys are so restricted, kind of like even in the military, Geneva Convention stuff. Like, so here Border Patrol is like, no, you're not supposed to do anything. Like you kind of help people, And so when the cartel knows that and they're like, well, we don't give a shit. We'll literally kill someone right this second if we need to. Like, who do you think's in charge down there? It's the guys that are going to be more ruthless, of course.
It's like, the Dark Knight Rises with Bane. And that dude's like, I've paid you a small fortune. And he's just like, he puts his hand on his shoulder. He's like, do you feel in charge right now? Like, are you in control of this situation? Because you're not.
I'm in charge here. Do you feel in charge? Right?
Yeah, exactly. And like it is dangerous, like as far as the world goes and the most dangerous places to go, the southern border is definitely in the top 10. But again, they're not picking fights.
Yeah.
Like they're not trying to get in trouble because they're making so much money off of it. If they jeopardize that, they jeopardize that enterprise. So there's that portion to it. And that whole area it's very rough. It's extremely rough country, which is tough to navigate, but it also aids you because like if you are to get into the shit, like, you can break contact, put a terrain feature in between you and kind of recalibrate an exfil, do what you got to do.
So that's the Army coming out of you right there.
Yeah.
Right? So what did you do in the Army? Because we talked about it a lot on the border, and I was like, man, I'm really grateful this dude's with us.
My Army trip was, it wasn't unlike many others. So I initially enlisted as an 18 X-ray. I went to the recruiter and I was like, I want an 18 X-ray contract. And they're like, how do you know what that is?
Yeah, which is what?
So it used to be called the SF Baby program, but it's a Special Forces candidate. So as an 18 X-ray, you go from infantry basic training. So if you go to like your secondary MOS is 11 Bravo infantry, but you go to infantry basic training. You go to airborne school right after that. And then you go up to Fort Bragg, where you're at the Special Warfare Center in school, and just getting your shit pushed in for a few weeks. You go to a course called SOPSI. What do they call it? They call it something else now, but the Special Operations Preparation Course.
Is it like SEER school kind of?
No, it's it's basically CrossFit camp.
Okay,
is what it is. So. Back when I went, we were going out. You go out to Camp McCall for 3 weeks, where they do Special Forces selection. You go out to Camp McCall, and you are doing like 3 or 4 workouts a day, where you're just hauling around pain pills and kettlebells and sandbags and rucks and runs, and you're just doing this super it's very athletic.
Cool,
but you're just eating as much as you can, sleeping as much as you can, hanging out with the boys, working out like crazy, working on land nav and stuff like that.
That's like 3 weeks.
Yeah, you do it for 3 weeks.
Wow.
And then it's supposed to train you up to immediately go into Special Forces selection. So you're at 4th Bat doing whatever, you go to SOPSI and then to SFAS, which is another 3 weeks, and get selected.
Yeah.
So I went to SFAS twice and I didn't get selected. One of the times was administrative, like the paperwork was wrong for my packet. So I was supposed to get rolled, and then they gave me like a 2-year return date. And I was like, screw this, dude.
Yeah.
And then after that, I went to psychological operations. So I got out, when I didn't get selected, I got off the bus from Camp McCall back at Fort Bragg, and I went to the Special Operations Recruiting Battalion. And they have, their desk, all the special operations units have guys there, and they're recruiting guys. And so I got off the bus, drove straight there. So I still have like my selection uniform, like you got name like the
Sure.
white tape on with
They
your
know
number.
where you came from.
Yeah, they're like,
Yeah.
did you like?
What's going on here?
And I'm like, listen, I just got non-selected. I need to get selected somewhere. Like, I'm not going to the big army. And the Ranger Battalion was out that day. Civil Affairs was out that day. There was this guy there who was like, hey man, have you ever heard of PsyOps? And I'm like, oh, tell me about PsyOps. He's like, we have this cool unit called Bravo 9. And they're like our tier 1 direct action guys who attach to all the cool units and they do cool stuff. I'm like, cool, let's do it. And so I think like a month and a half later, I was back out at Camp McCall doing PsyOps selection, and they didn't select me. They were like, hey, you're a little aggressive and intense. You should probably go to Special Forces. I'm like, I'll show you aggressive.
Yeah.
I'm going to beat your face in, But I ended up doing the majority of my time over with the 82nd Airborne and 2nd Brigade, 1325 Red Falcon. So,
Nice.
and it was a freaking roller coaster. Initially, I'm a private in the 82nd Airborne.
So you doing a lot of jumping out of planes? Or?
Yeah, I probably did like 30 plus jumps.
Mm-hmm.
I need to look at my jump log and see what the actual number is, but it's somewhere around there. But I had a great career. I say career. I had a great, time in the Army where, it's just different when you show up and you have a little bit more experience under your belt. I'd already served a mission. I knew what I, kind of was about. I had a little bit more resolve.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just had like that solution-based thinking, critical thinking. I was able to get a team and be a team leader pretty early on. I was at my unit for about 2 months, and then I'm a PFC with a fire team. I'm like, heck yeah, dude,
Cool.
This is awesome. I ended up getting an Article 15 for having a gun in my truck. So, they busted me down
What's the
to
problem with that? On base, I guess.
yeah. So I got UCMJ all the way busted down to E1.
Oh man,
Dude, they freaking took my lunch money. It was bad. I'm still recovering from it.
Yeah,
right
yeah.
now, like financially, I'm still recovering from that.
from that too.
Yeah. And that was 2019.
Oh man, it's
So
like, dude, you guys have been training me to be a professional and be one with this thing.
yeah.
And now you're gonna bust me down.
It wasn't even that. It was like a little snub nose revolver that I just had in my truck
Oh, my
because I was traveling at the time. So, but then, E1 team leader doing my thing, and then ended up deploying to Iraq in 2020, which was, it was Iraq 2020. So it wasn't the most chaotic of
Yeah.
battle spaces, but, overall it was a net positive experience. A lot of, ups and downs with that. You got to really figure out how to deal with people
Yeah.
when you're living with some of the worst guys you've ever met in a tent for 9 months.
Agreed.
And it was all during COVID too. So we're getting locked
Oh,
down
no.
and doing like restricted. They're putting a barbed wire around us. We're sneaking out. Like it was kind of nutty. And then, getting back from Iraq, finishing out my time with the 82nd, I was pretty sure I was going to get out of that point just because of all the COVID mandates. They were coming down on me pretty hard to get the vaccine. I ended up having to get it because it would have meant like a dishonorable discharge. I would have lost all my VA benefits. I don't like, it was like, ugh.
And you already had this taste of getting busted doing E1.
Yeah. I was like, dude, I know how bad this could be.
Yeah.
So like this, wasn't the hill to die on.
Wow.
And then, got to do had a couple of good experiences out at, JRTC and, some training environments. Got to do some squad leader, dynamic time stuff, whatever, training dudes up. And then I left hot. I was like, all right, don't let, the door ain't hitting me on the way out, dude.
Yeah.
I'm out of here so fast.
I'm out of here. So is that where, like you said, you got your first gun at 6, I think? Or
12.
At 12. And then obviously you kept that going through the Army and through all the Special Forces selection and all that kind of stuff. And then you're doing some stuff now. And like, if anyone talks to you about guns, you'd be like, oh shit, I need to learn a lot more because Cade knows freaking all these different things. So you're like designing like accessories and different things now.
Yeah.
For firearms for civilians, right?
Yeah. So I got a couple, I mean, there's an element to like that special operator mindset. And, just because I didn't get I had a determination when the last time I didn't get selected, I got non-selected. They're like, hey, you passed, but we don't want you. And I was like, dude, that was a kick in the nuts.
Yeah.
But I had a determination that just because I'm not in a tier 1 organization doesn't mean I can't be a tier 1 individual. So I'm going to train myself and educate myself and be an asset, not a liability. Be a tier 1 individual who can lead the boys, who people can look to for whatever it is.
Right.
And so that really, like when it came to like, oh, how do we implement different weapon systems? And you just learn all the military stuff for it. But you look at the history of special operators, right? And special operations units, and they made it up. They figured it out. If they needed something,
Literally.
They figured it out. So, all these guys wearing Cry Precision combat tops and combat pants and stuff like that. Dude, I got a closet full of it. But when you realize like it was just called originally it was just the raid mod. And is when they were cutting the sleeves off of their uniforms, sewing them onto Under Armour shirts, and then taking the pockets off the front, putting one right here and one on the front of their pants.
Sure.
That was the raid mod. And they came up with that. Like they were literally overseas with a sewing machine sewing that crap. And that's what became all of this stuff today. So it's like, okay, identifying what I have as a need, how do I make that happen? And so one of the things that I'm working on right now is this bag that I'm really excited about. I'm not a huge fan of like super tactical looking bags, especially as a civilian, especially with, I have awesome opportunities to train with law enforcement and different guys like that. So we're working on a very low vis bag. That's basically a JanSport bag designed for concealed carry of like, pistols or, PCCs, PDW type stuff. So
I love how you tied it back to like the guys just started to piece together like call it tactical clothing that actually worked for them. It's literally just like, I'm not at my best, or I don't like how this fits, or I could really use something here. And it's like, well, let's just freaking make it.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing with this bag. And it actually reminds me of my buddy Devin at Method. He makes his Marlboro stuff. It's denim, but it's tactical denim. He put a stretchy in all the right places. This pockets where he wants it. And it's just like, well, why? Well, that's just what I decided I need. Just like, on your weapons, you're very particular, but I want this kind of rail, this kind of sight, this kind of trigger, this kind of stock, this kind of fill in the blank stuff, because that's how I can operate most effectively. And I love that it sounds like the special operations thing is essentially special. It's called that for a reason, right? Because it's not by the book.
It's not standard.
Yeah, it's not standard. It's whatever we need to do to be successful at whatever it is, that's what we're going to do. And we have the ability and the brains to make it happen.
I really love, I think one of the best stories is, what's his name? He was on Sean Ryan. He was a Marsoc dude. Prime, something Prime.
Something Prime.
His name was Prime. I can't remember. But he's got this, Afghanistan story. They had this minefield essentially. Like they had this route. They knew it was mined. And they're like, how do we, we need to get the bot out there, EOD, whatever. And he's like, what if we just took like 100 goats and just pushed them down the line?
Right.
And then
see what happens.
Let them clear it. And it worked. And it's like, we can either pay $500,000 for EOD, bomb tech craziness to come out, or we can pay $500 to a farmer for a couple goats and just use that.
And be done right now.
And
there's no risk of anyone losing their life.
No risk.
Yeah.
No risk at all. No risk to property. No risk. Everybody's happy.
Was that Cody?
No, it wasn't Cody. It was, I'll have to look it up.
Shout out to Cody Alford. He's an awesome dude, good buddy of ours.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I want to get him on the show sometime.
Cool.
Dude, Cody's story freaking it gets me fired up.
I've known him for a couple of years, but until I watched the podcast with Sean, I was just like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like, we never got into that. We were talking other stuff and hanging out and whatnot, but I'm like, dude, some of the best interviews I've ever heard have been with Cody.
Yeah.
Like the way he describes this and the stuff he has done and has went through, it's like, dude, if there's anybody like real out there, like modern day, like in this shit Vietnam type guy, it's freaking Cody Alford.
And he's such a cool dude.
Such a cool guy. Such a nice dude, biggest heart, nicest guy, like he looks terrifying, but like he's really, really nice, good dude.
Well, I mean, he's another prime example of like that operator mindset, that tier one mindset is doing the most with what you don't have. Yeah. Right. Like I have, even roll it back to like the Rhodesian Bush Wars with the Sella Scouts. Those dudes were going out there with PF flyers on an FNFAL, one mag in the gun, one mag in their pocket, and they were one of the most effective guerrilla forces ever. Like Operation Dingo, it was, how many of them? It was like 85 guys, 85 Rhodesian dudes fighting something like 3,000 Zanu forces. And they smoked like 1,500 of them. Damn. They only had 3 injuries, not even KIA. 85 guys held off 3,000 dudes. Like, how are you doing that? Like, what is there's obviously something else happening here other than just like we need more of this, we need more of that. It's like, you don't need more. You just got to do more with what you got.
Right.
And, like this bag that I'm trying to design. Or like another good example is like I do a lot of long range shooting. And so, I want something that can give me like extreme long range capabilities, maintain it in a short action, which I mean, they're obviously like they make rounds for it, but like I want a 308. I want to shoot a 308. Ammo's cheap. It's available. It's ubiquitous. But I want to design a round that flies a little bit better, that hits a little bit harder, goes a little bit further. So, I'm working with a couple of guys right now to do a 208 grain Hornady AMAX 308 round. And we have the load tables and everything to push it out at about 2,500 feet per second, which means you're able to go from a 900 yard gun to a like 1,500 yard gun.
It's a big difference.
Huge difference. Yeah. Huge difference. And you're going from hitting with 400 round or 400 foot-pounds of energy at 900 yards to 400 foot-pounds of energy at 1,700 yards.
Yeah.
Right. But you don't change the package at all. So how do you do the most? Because it's way cheaper to make one bullet than it is to buy a different gun.
Correct.
So can I do the most with what I have? How can I optimize this solution that I have in front of me already and just, tweak it the way I need to make it work? And, whether that be, obviously those are some pretty hands-on kinetic applications, but this as a businessman, like you don't just like get a business and then have the business. You got to do everything with nothing. You got to make it happen with absolutely nothing until like it starts producing. And you go from, dudes overseas sewing their uniforms in certain patterns to multi-million-dollar companies with government contracts to everyone in the world and charging $500 for a pair of pants.
Yeah.
Like there's 30 years of innovation there. There's 30 years of time of making it happen. And so how do you go from point A, like in that business sense, to point B, where it's like, you have a cell phone in your pocket. You have all of the media and advertisement. And I mean, we don't even need all this equipment. We could do a podcast on an iPhone right now.
Totally.
And it would work. People do it. All the YouTube content. And, we see this in the political space too, where historically you got to pay for ad space and TV hits and news hits. And old school media was really like, they could ice you out and that'd be it. But now all you have to do is pull out your phone and you're able to reach everybody. And everybody has a phone. Right. And again, we go back to like fear not, do right and things like that. Like what is that practical kinetic solution to this problem of how do I do the most with what I have? In the business sense, how do you make it happen? Yeah. Not how do you make up an excuse to not do it, but how do you make it happen?
Yeah. And there's like two things that stand out to me for this whole conversation, whether it's in business or politics or, special operations or whatever. And it's like thinking outside the box, but also doing the right thing. And I think maybe those two things alone, if we can get more politicians that think like that, I mean, I feel like we could be set up for more success. Think outside the box, not these little tiny boxes that a political party wants you to stay in, or these different parameters or these made up rules that someone else made up, but if you think outside that box, but also do the right thing, you don't have to fear about what's going on.
Exactly.
That's why I really like fear not, do right. Do right, you don't have to fear. Remember which way you cut it, it works.
Yeah.
And I'm also really glad that you're out there, helping Sheriff Lamb, helping your dad run for Senate, because I feel like, not even politically speaking, just from the standpoint of who do we want and need in there as a leader, as someone that can do the right thing and can think outside the box and will actually do what needs to be done, and he's not doing it for power or anything like that. Like I know you're supporting him, and I know it's just so cool to see that family tree grow. And I'm really excited to see what you do with all of your things, just your time in the Army, now doing all these different things around the right thing, but also like keeping it real and just showing what's going on out there and not being afraid to share what you've learned and what you see and all that and help make the society better.
I mean, it's not easy.
No.
And it's not even about it's not easy to do even that in sense, but it's having that mental and emotional resolve to be like, oh, this is going to be unpopular.
Totally.
This is not going to gain favorability with, whoever, and that's one of the things that we're facing, like with the campaign, is it's like, funding wise, it's a slugfest because nobody wants to fund anybody. Everybody's tapped out. Nobody wants to fund anybody. And it goes back to that mindset. How are you able to do the most with what you have? Because you don't have a lot.
Think outside the box, do the right thing.
Think outside the box, do the right thing. Being strong on those stances and opinions and being true to the truth.
Right.
Like acknowledging truth, reinforcing truth, spreading truth, being truthful, being transparent, doing the right thing. And then it's doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And, people crave that nowadays. And it resonates more and more with people who hear that message.
Yeah. So final question for you, Cade Lamb, is what does earn it mean to you?
There is no free chicken. There is no free chicken. Everything has a cost. Everything has a cost. Even if it's, even down to social media, right? You can download Instagram on your phone for free, but they are data mining the crap out of you as you do it. And they're using that information on you to make millions of dollars. So it's not free. So you got to identify, like, what are the things that I really want out of life? What are the things that are really important to me out of life? And, acknowledging the cost and the sacrifice of what it takes to achieve those things, whether it be political office, whether it be running a successful business, a successful podcast. You and I both have young daughters and wives not here right now that, like, I like my family. I like spending time with them. I have become much less social since having a family because I like them, but I got to earn it. I got to earn the time with my family. I got to earn the, provide, what I'm able to provide for them. And you got to have that balance, but nothing is given and you reap what you sow. So to earn it all means, not necessarily you got to sweat it out. It's not necessarily sweat equity, but relentlessly pursuing the things that set your soul on fire and then holding on to that with vigor and tenacity because they will be challenged. Anybody who's married knows that. My wife is the best person I've ever met in the world, and I love her more than anything. But that being said, it's freaking tough. It takes so much patience sometimes for both of us to handle a 3-year-old, to handle each other, to handle work, to handle our parents. And there's so many forces out there that want to separate that. So how do you earn it, right? Same thing with the business. There's so many things that want to shoot you down, whether it's, my plan didn't work out. Okay, well, what's good? What's the next plan? You don't have the money, you don't have the inventory, you don't have the time, you don't have the resources. It's like, listen, you have something that most people don't, which is a business. You have an idea, you have a platform. Earn it. Earn what you want it to be. Get out there and execute on it. My grandpa always says this, but you can wish in one hand and shit in the other. And you'll see which one fills up first.
That's right. Well, dude, I'm going to be the first guy to rock the JanSport bag.
Heck yeah, dude.
So where would you like people to find you and see what you do?
So I got a couple of pages. If you want Fear Not Do Right. So my personal is on Instagram is cade.r.lamb. Okay. Twitter, it's Cade_Lamb. And that's with a C. Fear Not Do Right is at Fear Not Do Right on Instagram, and then at FNDR_USA on Twitter. And then Sonoran Asset Group, if you're interested in more politics and border stuff, that's going to be Sonoran Asset Group on Instagram. Awesome. And then you can also support, if you wanted to check out the Fear Not Do Right podcast, who we're going to be having an awesome guest coming on pretty soon, huh?
That's right.
That'll be at fearnotdoright.com or anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Dude, awesome. Cade Lamb, thanks for being on, man. Best of luck to you, the family, business, everything. Just a huge fan, and I'm really excited and honored to know you.
Likewise, brother.
Thank you, bro.